Hey everyone, it's YANE podcast about biohacking, biotechnology related everything by Yanelab team. And today with me is Sasha Fishman, who's a sculptor and researcher and just a very fascinating person who does pretty interesting stuff. And hey Sasha, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Bio art, can I call you bio artist? Because I think it's kind of like close.
You can. I guess yes, you can call me that. I guess I don't think of myself as one. But I work with biological material and I'm an artist, so it's appropriate, I guess.
So you do sculpture, which I've seen, and it not like in real life, but through Instagram and just like social media. And it is very fascinating and just beautiful. I gotta say, I love it.
Thank you.
It's really neat. And I like, so you don't call yourself a bio artist, you call yourself just an artist who uses biomaterials or bio-related stuff for your work, which is actually pretty interesting because I don't know, I feel like bio artist is it's not a mainstream name just because like not a lot of people know about it, but also it's kind of, some people think it's lame to call themselves bio artists.
I don't know if it's not lame, it's I guess I feel pigeonholed into a specific way of working, and I work with biological materials, I work with plastics, I work with a lot of different things that kind of contradict each other. So I feel like, yeah, I'm a sculptor. Yeah.
I gotta ask you about your cicada shell collection.
Oh yeah, it's I have brought some with me to LA. There's so many.
So cicadas are, first of all, they're actually very loud because I went to Texas and I had no idea they're so loud. And they like wake up once in 17 years or something. So I guess it's been a while since I heard them last time. I was like a little kid.
Yeah, I think those are the annual ones that you heard because I'm pretty sure that there aren't the 17-year ones in Texas, but there are annual cicadas all over the country. And the cicadas in Texas actually, I love the noises they make, especially at night. It's really, really beautiful and mesmerizing. The 17-year periodic cicadas make a very different noise, and it's kind of just like this like really loud scream, like it's like a symphony of screaming, and they just like it ebbs and flows in this way that I don't know, you kind of, when it gets so loud it's a little bit unbearable, but also just like amazing that these really small creatures could make that much noise. It was the most magical thing to experience. And there are other periodic cicadas throughout the US. There's 13-year cicadas, and I should know how to pronounce my cicada scientific names, but I don't want to butcher it. But yeah, there's a whole world of periodic cicadas, and a lot of them are in the US. From what I have read, I don't believe there are other periodic cicadas that are on that 17-year cycle anywhere outside of the US. I think there's 4-year cycles. But yeah, don't quote me on that. Y'all should look it up if you're unsure.
I have no idea. I'm a biologist who knows nothing about biology.
Yeah, it's been, and another thing about it that has been exciting has just been to meet entomologists and learn more about insects, because when I went to look for cicadas at night, which was when they were molting, I found all these other insects out there I had never seen before, and they were like all these leopard slugs. And I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I went to go see the cicadas, and yeah, it was crazy. It's just like everywhere you look, there's this white body emerging from this brown shell, and over the course of like 12 hours it turns to this black glossy color. It's like in this really vulnerable larval state, and a lot of them also don't form properly, so some of them get stuck in their shells. And they're so so many. Like the first cicadas that were coming out, I was I was trying to help them get out of their shells, the ones that were getting
Oh.
stuck. But then like a couple days later, there's just so many, it becomes kind of it's a little bit disgusting, but it's also like, when else do you get to see that many bugs at once? I think they said there was like 1.5 million per acre in Maryland. Maryland was also the epicenter of the periodic cicada emergence for brood 10. Yeah, I think there will also be the 13-year cicadas in Oklahoma in a couple of years. I was reading about them because I'm doing a show in Oklahoma this summer, and I was like just interested in where else the cicadas have emerged, and they actually have more annual, or not more annual, more periodic cicadas in Oklahoma than in Maryland. Even though Maryland's the epicenter of the brood 10, there's other species out there that emerge at different times, and sometimes they also come out before we expect them to, and we're still unsure if it's caused by climate change. But yeah, they're also kind of like this indicator of time because they have this consistent schedule, and by the time they come out again, most people have forgotten what they were and when they came out and how they came out, and it's just like this overwhelming period of time where it's like a very specific 2 weeks when they peak, and then everything after that, it's like a slow fade out of all the cicadas.
Tell me about your cicada project.
Yeah, I've been working a lot with chitosan, which is bio-based material you get from cicada shells, from crab shells, from some mycelium, from the cell walls, and from algae, from some strains of algae. And I remembered all the shells from the cicadas, and I also have seen annual cicada shells all over the place, and I know that there's chitosan or chitin in the shells. So I was thinking about how there would be all this leftover cicada shell material everywhere, and how it would be a really good opportunity to engage the community and also just talk about materials, where they come from, and kind of talk about the questions I have around resources and extraction with these collected cicada shells. So people would collect their cicada shells after cicadas were molt. So it wasn't like we were taking a dead cicada, we were taking the molt from the cicada nymph. So like,
so no cicadas were harmed.
Yeah, no cicadas were harmed. I love all the cicada shells, all the little cicadas. Some people grabbed handfuls of the shells, and there were some dead cicadas in the shells that they gave me, but the whole experience was just amazing. What was I gonna say? So the nymphs, the cicadas will like basically grow underground for 17 years. And when the ground becomes, I think it's about like 65 degrees, or it's like in the 60s, when the ground gets to this specific temperature, they begin to crawl towards the surface, and they emerge, and you'll see these little holes when it rains in the ground. It looks like it's like little tiny dots in the dirt. And then a couple weeks later, you start to see them, and they just start covering the sidewalk. All of these teeny tiny cicada nymphs, and they have no idea where they're going. And they just like, they start to secrete this this protein that causes them to begin to molt. And whenever that happens, they kind of do this little dance, and basically what they want to do is start crawling up towards a tree. So they just start going for it, and they can't really see anything. They don't know what's going on. And when they start to secrete that protein, I believe it is a protein. I'm like so afraid that I'm going to say the wrong, like if it's enzyme protein, but basically they will start to come out of their shells, and they will do it wherever. So they'll do it on top of another cicada that's also molting. They will do it on your shirt. They will do it on the sidewalk where you're about to step, in the most dangerous places. So it's kind of like, you really see just I don't know, evolution happening in front of you, it feels like, because you can see the ones that are going to get weeded out because there's just no way they're going to make it to the tree as much as you want to help the hundreds of cicadas in front of you. And the ones that get stuck, and then the ones that emerge. It's like there's so many obstacles they go through to get to just that phase where they molt. And then once they molt, they have about 2 weeks before they die. And all they want to do is mate. So the males go into the trees and start screaming for the females. And yeah, and then once the females are impregnated, a couple weeks later, they have this like basically like serrated knife in their crotch that will carve into the tree and then inject their eggs into the tree, and then they die. And then a couple weeks later, I looked for it, but I didn't see it. Apparently there's little tiny cicada eggs that will like rain from the trees. Well, it's the little nymphs have hatched, and they are so tiny and translucent, and basically they just like fall down from the tree and start to just dig underground until they hit a tree root, and that's what they basically latch onto and gain their nutrients from for 17 years.
That's like a really interesting I know scenario for a movie. It was epic.
Yeah, I know.
Like this whole metamorphosis.
I got so into it. Yeah.
Just like going through it, and you're just collecting shells to make some chitosan base materials.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, it's at that point in their life cycle that I'm kind of intervening, because they leave this shell behind and they start to go into the trees and move on to their next part of life. And these shells accumulate and they're covering the ground. And I was wondering, like, how does this affect the ecosystem if I were to take these? Because because I have been working with chitosan in thinking about how that could be scaled up to be used for some biomaterial that has an industrial application. Where would it be sourced from? Obviously, I could use shrimp shells from seafood waste, but also if we hypothetically were to use cicada shells, it just felt like a kind of interesting, I don't know, thing to see the start and end to this life cycle. And in thinking about how we were to take all these shells, how would that affect the trees? Would it be detrimental to whatever area it came from? Does it give back to the trees? My theory is that it does, because there are minerals and other materials in the shells that basically act as a fertilizer for the tree that it had grown from. But yeah, it kind of can be used to think about how other industrial materials and resources that we're beginning to look at can how we're impacting those ecosystems and those organisms.
And how do you use the chitos and the shells you collected?
Oh yeah, sorry, I keep getting excited about different parts of this.
No,
so,
it's interesting.
So I did a workshop. It was called the Timekeepers Workshop because the cicadas are like timekeepers, 17 years. And we took all the shells that people had collected, we ground up the shells, and we extracted chitosan from them and cast bioplastics. I couldn't do the whole literal extraction part during the workshop because it would take a couple of days, but essentially what I was showing everyone was how you deproteinize and demineralize the chitin from the cicada shells, because essentially the way that chitin exists naturally, it's in this form that isn't water soluble. So to remove the proteins and the minerals, you're basically removing all the other materials in the shells, and then you deacetylate the material, so that takes out the acetyl groups, which makes it water soluble. So it's kind of just like warm baths of hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, very caustic materials, which was another part of the process that I didn't know about until doing this workshop, and also brought up another kind of point of talking about sustainability and like how extraction processes could be better developed, or maybe by working with bacteria that do also degrade the material and can pull out the chitin. But yeah, it was a really like fun experience to have to have that part, then to show people what the kind of end result looks like, where you have this solution, and people were casting the solution with cicada wings, and those were not wings that were from live cicadas. It was several weeks after all the cicadas had died out, and they you'll find these wings all over the ground because their bodies are the first to decay, and the shells and the wings, the shells require specific bacteria to break it down, one that will break down chitin. And then the wings also, they have, I believe, keratin. I think there's some chitin in the wings. And the wings will break down next from what I saw. And yeah, it was kind of just like using these like last remnants of the cicadas to create this material that could last for a little bit more time.
I'm actually interested in, well, that's all like super fun, and just like kaizen, I hear that word lately super often. Like it became like, I don't know, a cool thing to do, you know, just like do something in kaizen, or just like kaizen has so many applications, even like in molecular biology. Now people are using like kaizen to like, I don't know, put DNA on it, and like so it can be like a vector to enter the cell, and like all these crazy stuff, when kaizen's been like well known for a lot of years, like a lot of years. And so how did you start doing, well, you're a sculptor, right? How did you went into this biomaterial, bioplastics area in the first place?
Yeah, but yeah, it's been cool to see chitin around so much. It was kind of one that was a material that was overlooked, and now people are realizing how great it is. I went to school for art, and I fell in love with casting resin, and I still am in love with casting resin because it's this really beautiful, like transparent, versatile material. Of course, it's made from petroleum. It is very toxic to work with. It is toxic for the environment. It is basically just a decorative material, and it also has millions of applications. And the more that I worked with plastics and resin and researched just where they came from, the more I started to realize how much of plastic was around me all the time. And after I graduated, I was living in New York for a summer and didn't have a studio, and I was looking for a way to cast sculptures without using resin, with a material that was transparent. So I found bioplastics from some other artists, Hannah Yu and Sterling Wells, and I began just casting different materials, and I thought I figured everything out the first few materials that I made. And then a couple of days later, they were shrinking and getting moldy, and I was like, what is going on? And I didn't even know how to sterilize anything. And I was able to start finding people in New York because they have Gen Space, and I took a class there. And I was also interested in lab grown meat as a concept. I still am. And I went to New Harvest at MIT over the summer, which is a conference for cellular agriculture. And there was a guy there that was talking about making a centrifuge from a fan and biohacking. And it was just everything at once was like blowing my mind, like all these things around biomaterials and creating your own living system. And I never thought of these things before, or heard of them before. And it was really eye-opening to learn about all these things at once. And I also went to Bio Summit at MIT, and from meeting more biohackers and artists, I felt like there was more support and momentum to keep working with biomaterials and bioplastics, even though I kept finding all these obstacles with the way that all these materials shrink and warp and get moldy from the water content in them. I have still not been able to work with them the way that I want to, but they've really changed the way that I think about materials, what I expect of them, and how they can perform for me, and also just the way that I feel like I need to control it, because I'm so used to having that from plastics. And yeah, it's been like 4 years now, I think, since I first started to work with them. And chitosan, I actually found chitosan at Biohack the Planet. It was from Gabriel Lucina. I was talking with him about my conundrum of trying out all these different materials and not finding anything that worked for what I wanted, which is still my conundrum, but I feel more comfortable with what I'm doing now. And he was like, chitosan is your answer. And I ordered some, and I dissolved it in vinegar as he told me to, and I cast it, and it just melted into this film that in this way that I just fell in love with. And I ended up working with it and doing a fellowship with the lab at Caltech, where I got to learn how to do scientific research, and I got to make tools for my studio to develop the material. So I got to measure some of the characteristics like viscosity, tensile strength, and some of the optical properties of the materials. And yeah, it was really exciting. And I've been working with chitosan so much now, and I've been able to start sewing it. It basically is like this material that you get in a powder, and you dissolve it in vinegar, and it will, some chitosan is more viscous than others, so some of it will gel a lot, some of it will be more liquidy. And basically from there, there's all these ways you can kind of work with it, with adding like glycerin to make it more flexible, or just combining it with other materials. And then I usually just cast it into a sheet and let it dry. And I love it because I don't have to use any heat. And with other biomaterials, I have to let it cook on a hot plate. Yeah.
So you started as a, just like as you are as a sculptor, and you try to find something that is not resin, that is not so toxic, but has same kind of similar properties. And then you kind of went to learn in biology, chemistry, and physics, and just like all that to find that perfect material and to master your skills and just how you use it medium. That's a lot of dedication. That is just a super cool, I gotta admit.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot. How did you get into biohacking? I've been wondering that.
I mean, I got into my first year of university studying biotech just because I was always curious about biology, and I just thought that I should study something that has a lot of practical implications. Like biotech is like agriculture, medicine, and lots of energy, lots of stuff. So I got into university here in Ukraine, but I got so disappointed in educational system, and I became super depressed after my first semester because I was very maximalistic. So I was like, oh, I gotta go to university and I'm gonna like save people's lives and blah blah blah. Well, I was like 17, so I mean, understandable, right? I was a romantic.
Oh.
But
yeah,
then
I feel like we all are.
yeah,
first.
aren't we? It's like Josiah Zayner, he once said that in a podcast that scientists are repressed artists, and I stand by it. So I got really really disappointed and just sad because like I couldn't do what I wanted to. And my brother, who's actually he's doing machine learning and artificial intelligence, he was just like, oh, look what biohackers do. So that's how I started, and just started doing like silly experiments in my parents' house. And then I moved into building my own biohacking space and working with different people. So it's kind of like it's been a journey. I wouldn't call myself like a proper scientist. It's not like I do experiments 24/7. I do experiments, I do like research, but mostly I feel like I'm just like, what I do is just creating community, and it's super silly also, but I actually find more joy in doing that than just experiments.
Yeah,
I like
it's definitely good to interact with people and not just bacteria.
I like being able to just like give resources to people so like they can use everything. And I mean, they're obviously much more talented than I am, so I can just like give them resources. So the more people I give resources to, the more the possibility of something beautiful or like super useful emerging is there. So it's kind of what I do, just trying to have fun and like meet a lot of cool people.
Yeah, that's awesome. How big is the community there?
I mean, it was non-existent when I first started. I turned out to be the first person in Ukraine to start biohacking. And then I started researching if there's a DIY biolab in Ukraine, and there was none. So I was like, I guess I'll start. So I just started inviting like my friends, once a week, like let's drink beer and do CRISPR or something like that. So I started doing that. Now I don't know, I feel like there's like a few dozen people in Dnipro where I'm from. There's also like people in other cities, and just like been collaborating with artists and makers, so slowly growing. So I don't know, I really want every major city in Ukraine to have a DIY biolab, just because people in Ukraine are really hungry for opportunities, resources, and they're super talented. Like, you don't need to force anyone to do anything. Just like, yeah, here's materials, here's resources, and they're so like psyched and so excited they can believe it's like for free. I don't charge them anything. I'm just like, yeah, just do whatever. And people, first of all, they think it's fraud because I don't know, Slavic people are skeptic about everything. If you want to like, if you're kind, they're super skeptic. They're like, what's going on? Like, people hear them smile in the street. A lot of people. Josiah's been here a few weeks before, and he was like, "Oh yeah, whoa, no one smiles." I'm like, "Yeah, people don't trust other people." So yeah, it's interesting how when people gain trust, they're just using it to the maximum and trying to expand the boundaries. I can tell that like my lab is more equipped than my university lab.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it also sucks. Can you imagine how bad our educational system is then?
Yeah.
Oh, my lab is better. But yeah.
My lab is better.
Yeah, it's not that good. But I feel like, we kind of started talking about science and art, and a lot of people think, I think Isaac Asimov said that it's, same thing. Science and art, just like different sides of the coin. But I feel like artists are way better at predicting the future. Artists are actually the ones who predict science, how it should be like in the future. In my opinion, yeah, scientists are repressed artists. So actual artists, they kind of pave the way and just show scientists direction where to go. Because I don't know, I feel like all the progress that's been made in like biomaterials is because of artists, not because of scientists, which is interesting. Like, why wouldn't scientists think about it? But it's artists who actually do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the artists that work with biomaterials that I've seen are more designers, and I feel like they're really good at finding applications for the materials, and also like conceptual applications, and expanding the boundaries of what that future could be of the material application too. And yeah, I agree. I feel like working with scientists, I feel like we work in like kind of similar patterns, just like different ways of thinking, and it's definitely hard for me to like kind of sit in a rigid box sometimes, but it also can be helpful to have that structure, and also just because you need that the consistency too. But I think that there's also so much when you open that up to like community and working with other people, but also like to do something that's uncomfortable with whatever research you're doing. That, and it's hard when a lot of the scientific experiments are very narrow. Like, you have to just do this specific set of things over and over. And when I start doing those specific things, I start to get all these other ideas about what else I could do, and I usually end up doing it, but when I was doing the fellowship, because it was so intensive, I wasn't able to do that, and it was a good way to focus on just like experiencing what that scientific process is like, but it definitely made me think about how it has affected the overall like academic scientific industry or community. And yeah, it's interesting. I feel like alternative forms of education, like your lab, I assume you do workshops and educational stuff too, and I feel like having those outlets are so important to experience these other ways of working, especially if you are in the sciences and academia and you want that but you don't know where to go. There's, I don't know, as an artist, I feel like I've learned the ways to do that myself, but I think the internet is another way to kind of help navigate that, but I don't know what it's like, and I feel like having the community is huge for just guiding that.
No, I agree. I feel like, scientists don't have a lot of freedom in choosing, or like, not honestly choosing what they do, but choosing crazy ideas. Because like you cannot do something crazy. You cannot, or like, and crazy is not necessarily like actually crazy when people call you insane. It's just like something that like slightly differs from this old system of thinking. This is, I think, what science is. And I swear to God, no one knows in science world anything about biomaterials. If you go to academia, people don't really even think about it. They don't talk about it. And it's weird because like, doesn't this bother you? I feel like, I don't know, maybe because like I'm Gen Z and like, and I feel like Gen Z and millennials, they've been like born into this world and everyone's just like, yeah, like world hunger, the world dies, plastic consumption, global warming. And all you think about it, like since you're being a kid, you kind of, in this info sphere of just like everything's going to shit and you have to fix it. And I know, I feel like scientists are kind of like boomers in that way. Oh my gosh, I sound like a super Gen Z. I'm like, oh yeah, scientists are boomers and we are cool. Well,
I mean, I do think, like, I think maybe artists have found the visual for like a lot of visual content for biomaterials, but like every time I start making a new biomaterial, I'm reading scientific papers, and that didn't happen overnight. It took me a while to learn how to read them and to know what to look for. And I'm still always learning, but I'm every time I read them, I'm so impressed because just like all the experiments that they do to characterize something or to study something, and all the different ways that you could like study the properties of how a material swells or how it is water resistant. There's all these different ways of like looking at something and measuring something that is so fascinating to me. And but at the same time, not having to deal with that at all, like how to measure a material you make, and having that just like space to not have to like think so specifically about it, it really does open up so much of those like generative ideas. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard because also like with academia, a lot of the research, it's free of like having these, well, I shouldn't say free, but you don't have to worry too much about the real world like application, which is also a problem because then all this work is done in academia and then it doesn't get applied. But also like they don't have to like worry about that part. If it's like at a company, you would have to worry about how it's going to kind of function out in the world
and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of all these, it's like a trade-off. Yeah, it's something that I'm trying to figure out how to navigate, but also I'm thinking about ways that I can also teach other people about these things that I've been learning, with the importance of scientific research, but also the importance of kind of working with these materials artistically. And yeah, I think that I don't see it a lot in art, and I also I know what you mean about like the word biomaterial usually in the sciences is referring to a material that's for a medical application, um, rather than like an industrial application. And it can be frustrating sometimes when I'm looking for papers because I see all these materials for like bone scaffolding and things like that, which is really interesting and is exciting to read about, because it sometimes for what I'm looking for, it is what I need to read. But yeah, there's not like a kind of universal way of talking about it. So there's all these different keywords I have to look up. And it definitely isn't at the forefront of what scientists are thinking about. I think green chemistry is like one of the older terms used to start thinking sustainably about the way that you work in a lab. But when I was working with labs at Caltech, a lot of them are still working with plastics, which, you know, it also depends on the funding where that's coming from, and there's only so much room you have to kind of decide that when you need to get support for your lab. So it's hard to say, but it was a bummer to see how little biomaterials were kind of taken seriously in these research areas at in academia.
That makes you a pioneer, though.
Oh,
In this,
thank you.
but like it
Thank you.
does make you a pioneer in this new. I mean, biomaterials are pretty new. They're not like, you know, older than 10 years, I would say. And so it does make you responsible to make it happen, right? To make it mainstream in a way. That's what I feel about biohacking. You kind of feel, I feel responsibility and like obligation, you know, to like put my effort into doing that. I don't know.
Mhm.
Just like, yeah, because like first time people called me a pioneer, I was like, oh God, no, please don't. Do not.
Yeah.
It's like when someone calls you a pioneer, that puts a lot of like weight and responsibility on your shoulders.
I feel like there's so many people before me that those are the pioneers. I'm seeing it's like I think biomaterials are becoming a lot more popular now, and I'm seeing a lot more people experimenting with them, which is awesome. And yeah, I just feel like I don't know, I'm part of that cycle. And
Just because you're shy, but I think you are a
but
pioneer.
thank you. But yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah,
I gotta ask you something. Can I ask you something before I forget? Let's do like top 5 biomaterials in your opinion.
oh my gosh. I don't, my biomaterial binder isn't here, but if it was here, I would look through it because I don't know if I can remember off the top of my head. But chitosan, I do really like sodium alginate and agar. There's this gelatin glycerin mixture, which my friend makes a recipe for. My friend Emily Blythe Jones. If you're interested, check out her Instagram, Emily Blythe Jones. She's posted it somewhere on there, but it's like it is one of the mixtures that is like you can cast thick and you can use it as like a silicone material, a silicone alternative for mold making. And 5.
Sodium alginate is kind of like face mask material.
Oh yeah, I guess probably. It's like spherification material. So you can cross-link it in an ionic solution with like calcium or magnesium. And it will basically form this skin around it when it goes into this calcium bath. And you basically get like a gusher. It's awesome. If you're interested, look up a spherification kit. It's used a lot in like molecular gastronomy. And
molecular gastronomy, I think. I'm sorry, what? I think it's the first time I hear
that's
this.
in, like some of the industries that kind of I feel like have influenced biomaterials. Molecular gastronomy is a big one. It's like the chemistry of cooking, kind of. It's like using chemistry in food. So like food science, new ways to kind of make new textures and mouth feels and pace with just using chemistry. So like a lot of the materials that I use come from like Modernist Pantry, and that's like a molecular gastronomy brand. Here's like carrageenan, like this stuff. I feel like you've probably seen this on Amazon somewhere. A lot of the materials I work with are also like from like the supplement section, which is funny. And I also feel like I've also going back to what you were saying before. So there's several things. I'm still trying to think of my other two materials.
What do you think about mycelium?
I do love mycelium too. I guess that could be one. I guess I haven't been on the mycelium train because I feel like everyone else is, and I'm just like, there's other things to do. But mycelium is really, really special and soft, and yeah, it's not as strong as I would like it to be, or transparent, which is okay. But yeah, I do like mycelium. Oh yeah, so I feel like other industries that have kind of pioneered biomaterials more than art would be well, design for one, and like fashion design and architecture, like building materials. I think that it's been going on in architecture for a lot longer. I think industries that have like commercial applications, you see biomaterial research a lot more and going on for a lot longer, because there is like this incentive and need for it, and also funding, which artists haven't had. But I also think that artists work with biomaterials unintentionally. Like I was, before I heard the term bioplastic, I was like casting with noodles and paper pulp, and I started to like get into like natural dyes and things like that. And I think that there's all these surrounding industries. Also, yeah, natural dyeing, textiles, those are biomaterials that's been going on for centuries, because they're working directly with fibers from organisms and from plants. And yeah, I feel like, at least for me, a biomaterial and its history is expansive to the sciences and design and all these other regions.
Yeah, I think first time I heard about just the word biomaterial, I was just watching this documentary on Netflix about design. It's called Abstract: The Art of Design. It was one of the episodes. What about Neri Oaksman?
Yeah,
she's an architect and bio artist, I guess I can short. And I was like, what? Wait, you can combine those two? And people are actually interested in like bio stuff outside biotech and just biology. And that was very interesting. I was like, oh, I guess there is a lot of funding there.
Yeah. Well, she's definitely made it work for her. It's it's been hard to find a path. There's no set way to kind of do it. But I feel like there will be more emerging fields in between art and science. I feel like I'm starting to see it a little bit. I think it happens more in Europe than it does in the US.
Hey, Europe.
Yeah, I know. I'm very envious of it. It's frustrating. I feel like we're really behind with it. But yeah, Neri Oxman is, I would call her a pioneer in this field. And also I think everyone in her lab too has really also made her work what it is. That's another thing that's hard, is like it's such a collective effort to make all of this happen, all these biomaterials, and it's a lot of like people working on top of what someone else did and iterating that recipe that they found online and making it work for their application.
Pretty much, and also science.
yeah, exactly. And the reason why I've been so interested in biohacking has been because one day I'd like to grow my sculptures from organisms, but I'm also trying to, like what I was with the cicadas, and I also had a tank of hagfish in my studio. The more I've been working with the actual origin of the materials that I work with, the more I'm wondering about the ethics of it and about just like how it not only affects that individual that I'm extracting the material from, but also the ecosystem and just like the collective matter around it. And yeah, all of this has happened through sculpture. Like everything goes back every time I'm making this biomaterial. It's like, how can I then sculpt with this? How can I incorporate it into the sculptures that I'm already making? And I already work with so many different materials like metals, glass, ceramics, all these different things. And it's just been like another layer of complexity, but also excitement for kind of just like generating this thing that might look like another thing that someone knows, but it's actually from a resource they would have never expected.
Do you
Yeah,
think
and I
that,
also,
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say,
Sorry.
I think that like if anyone is interested, I feel like just by kind of looking at things of like, how do you kind of just start to like move this around in your hands, or how could you use this sheet of material? It's a really exciting process.
Yeah. Do you think that you know, when you started using biomaterials in your work, in your sculpture, do you think it helped you express yourself better through your art? Does it add?
Good question.
It kind of adds layers.
I,
It adds density and just sentience into your work in a way.
yeah, and I definitely don't add the materials as much as I would like to. It's like I have my kind of experimental practice and then like the actual sculptures themselves. And a lot of it is also trying to become more comfortable with the ephemeral aspects of making that kind of work. But yeah, I guess I think it speaks to this kind of like almost like futile process that I keep going through to find something that is sculptable. Like when I do add it to my sculptures, it's like it usually will change throughout the course of an exhibition, or it required like very specific installation methods so that it doesn't degrade in a way, or like several times I've tried to hang a biomaterial and it's fallen because it was too heavy, and it just the tensile strength wasn't there. But it's like, yeah, basically a lot of the times something fails, and it creates these new ways of working for me. So it's been kind of just like, yeah, it's opened up a new way of working in this process that I guess it probably does express something better. But yeah, I think it more so adds to this like non-hierarchical way of looking at materials, of seeing plastic next to a bioplastic and seeing how that bioplastic is shrinking over the course of the exhibition while the plastic is staying completely the same. It's been very difficult, but I want to incorporate them more. And yeah.
Oh, I have like one last question for you that I actually like prepared. I mean, it's not that I actually prepare, like really prepare, but I try to like at least think about the conversation before I start it. I think that's just a good thing to do. Just like
that
think
is good.
about what you're gonna
Yeah.
say before you say it. I try to do that. Doesn't always work out for me, but whatever. What do you think is like for someone who wants to start, you know, experimenting with biomaterials? What would you advise them to experiment with? What's like the easiest thing to start with?
A lot of working with biomaterials is just like cooking. So you could just go into your kitchen and assuming you bake, you know, whoever this is, there's probably starch, gelatin, milk, vinegar. These are all things that you can start to work with. So like the first bioplastic I was making, because I began to think about where did plastic come from, what was plastic like before industrial plastics were a thing. And I was reading about casein plastic. So like it was called like galalith. There was like, it was basically the curds from milk were so like casein proteins were soaked and pressed, and they're soaked in formaldehyde, which helped to cross-link them. essentially you can just take your milk and you can pour vinegar into it, heat it up. If you look up like how to make casein bioplastic, that's like a way to start, and you'll get this kind of like material that comes out of the vinegar mixture with milk, and you can press it, and it's kind of like moldable. And you can also take starch and heat it up over the stove with water. If you don't have glycerin, you could try adding oil, but it'll probably come out of the film, but you never know what's going to happen. And the glycerin usually, as I said before, it makes it more flexible. And the same thing with gelatin. It's just like you're going to make Jello or some starch-based material, just don't add the sugar. And when you dry it, put it in front of a fan so it doesn't grow mold, unless you want that to happen. Yeah. So it's just like you can get started right now, and you just look up like bioplastic recipe. Don't have any expectations for what's going to happen because
just
you never know. Yeah.
I think it's good. I feel like if more people start doing that, it's kind of like biohacking. If more people just start experimenting and doing that, maybe something super cool will come out of it, right? Maybe some new biomaterial that actually like is super durable, or like whatever, waterproof, fireproof. Probably not, but you can still experiment with that.
And then you have to jump through all the hula hoops of like making it, I don't know, to get it actually out there. It's like that potential is really, I think, what still drives me. Once you get into the nitty-gritty of like trying to actually make something work, it doesn't get as exciting. But it's like the chase to get your bioplastic.
Thanks so much for having this conversation, for speaking about this very interesting topic, because I'm pretty sure most of the people that will hear this podcast probably never ever heard about word biomaterial or
really?
Bioplastic.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, if you're working with just like if you're biohacking and you're doing agar plates, if you let it dry, that's also a bioplastic.
Yeah, that's a film. I know, especially if there's like mold on it. It's really interesting. There's like crystals growing, all that stuff. I know. I definitely forgot a lot of petri dishes, just like in random places, and then I found them, and I'm like, what is this weird thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like a lot of people just know about like kombucha leather, which is like the most mainstream thing to do, I guess.
Yeah, that was like, I feel like for me it was like a step up. Like first I did the casein, and then I did starches and gelatin, then I did scobies, then I did natural dyeing, and then mycelium and algae. And it's like I'm still trying to work with more living things. So I am trying to grow some of these materials from bacteria, but I need to come to your lab or something. There isn't a lab here to learn, so
I have a spare bedroom in my apartment.
Oh, cool. I'll come next week.
Okay, well, I'm waiting for you. Rusty, you're not gonna invade us this week.
There. But it's definitely, the two can combine.
How can people, follow your work or support you?
Oh yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Sasha.Fishman, and my website is sashafishman.com, and I think there's a Facebook page also with my name. I don't use it a lot. I think it just posts my Instagram posts, but if you want to talk more, you can DM me, or my email is on my website somewhere, and just poke around. There's like different projects on my website too that I didn't talk about that I also probably need to put them up. They should be up on my website.
Definitely, because there's like all the images are just so stunning. I'm definitely gonna put some of them like in this podcast, but people need to like go and check it out and just like look, because like we're talking about sculpture. You have to look at it to like
You do, yes, yeah.
To understand.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really
thank you
enjoyed this
so much for
conversation.
having me. This was really fun. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what you've been working on too sometime.
Yeah, well, I hope there's going to be some updates soon.
Next week when I come.
Yeah, sure. We'll talk about it over a cup of tea or vodka. I don't know.
Vodka.
Cup of vodka, yeah.